Coming in at number 10, it's the Great Stink. Because of course it is. The sewer system in London, England prior to this happening was not a good system, to put it mildly. Human poop would often be pumped into cesspits, tanks, and big old holes in the ground that would quickly fill up and run off into the streets through culverts that ran down said streets. Or the yummy wet waste would seep into people's basements and foundations, creating pockets of methane that would cause explosions from time to time. All the sewage that did successfully go into the system, which was meant primarily for rainwater, just pumped out into the River Thames, and even some sources of drinking water. The problem is, other than the obvious ones there, it didn't actually flow out to sea through the river. No, it actually dispersed among the river thanks to the tidal nature of said river, which meant for centuries the river was just being injected with more and more and more sewage, which seeped into the ground all around the giant open sewer river that in the summer of 1958 all bubbled up to the surface thanks to the heat and released its lovely malodorous stench for all those far and wide around the city of London to sniff up. Nice. Thankfully, Joseph Bazalgette was the civil engineer placed in charge of designing the new system, and boy, did he do a good job. He basically saved the entire city. Joseph's sewers ran parallel of the River Thames and carried all the way east, where it would eventually flow out in the river again, but in a place where it actually did flow out into the sea. He also developed water treatment plants along the new sewer system to clean the nastiness, and he created embankments along the river that would help stop the waste continuing to build up even further. He even came up with other ways for the city to get fresh drinking water that could be used. All so that we would never have to remember this malodorous part of history ever again. Thanks, dude. You did good. Number 9. 3 for 1. Back in the day, a guy by the name of Robert Liston was renowned for being one of the fastest surgeons alive. Being fast as a surgeon then was a pretty damn good thing. And that's because the anesthesia we are accustomed to now didn't exist, so patients were awake for the entire surgery. So yeah, a quick surgery is pretty preferable. The thing with going fast though is that it's extremely easy to make a little whoopsie sometimes. For example, one time Liston was performing a leg amputation, but it turns out that he was working so fast he didn't realize he accidentally cut off 2 fingers of his assistant's hand. That's pretty bad, but then you learn that both the patient and the assistant passed away later of gangrene. But wait, there's even more. Doctors and medical students would often watch these surgeries from the gallery, which wasn't really a gallery like we have today. They were basically right beside you. During that same procedure that I just talked about, Liston accidentally swiped near an elderly doctor with a blade, slicing the fabric of the doctor's suit coat. Problem is, he thought he had been cut open, most likely because this guy just accidentally cut off his assistant's fingers. The doctor went into shock and passed away from a heart attack. This man took out 3 people just trying to save 1. That's insane. Number 8, the Berlin Wall. Most people are probably aware of this, but for younger audiences, maybe not. Basically, for about 30 years during the Cold War era, the Berlin Wall separated Germany's communist east side from the democratic west side. The makeshift wall itself was constructed overnight on the 12th and I guess the 13th of August 1961 by the German Democratic Republic to stop Western fascists from entering East Germany and undermining the building of a socialist state. But really, the wall was mainly just there to stop people from defecting from the east side to the west side. It wasn't exactly a big agreed upon thing, so people in Berlin woke up on August 13th completely cut off from family, friends, work, and their own homes, with no way to get from east to west. Eventually, the quickly built wall was replaced by a 12-foot tall, 4-foot wide concrete barrier guarded and covered with booby traps. At least 171 people were killed just trying to get over, under, or around the Berlin Wall, which stood until the 9th of November 1989. Maybe we should stop building walls between each other and just accept each other.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the Savannah cat. A product of love, or science, between a domestic cat and a serval, this feline is a strange cocktail of domestic cuddles and wild prowling. These guys don't do things by halves. They are the true embodiment of go big or go home. And by big, I mean double the size of your regular tabby, akin to swapping your cuddly kitten for a mini panther. And these bigger bodies house some pretty wild tendencies, a bit like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but in feline form. However, this mix of house pet and wild wild cat isn't just a spectacle, it's a little bit of a ticking time bomb. Let's face it, nobody wants their morning coffee interrupted by their pet tiger, cat, chasing local wildlife or causing a ruckus. It's this fine line between awe-inspiring and eyebrow-raising that makes the Savannah cat an ethical puzzle in the world of crossbreeding. In our number 6 spot today, we have the mule bird. The mule bird is a one-of-a-kind melody maker born from the union of a canary and a goldfinch. A musical marvel, you might say, but hold on to your feathers, because this birdie's tale is as unsettling as it is intriguing. You see, the mule bird is not just another chirper in the aviary, it's an aria virtuoso, belting out tunes that would make even Pavarotti's heart flutter. But, as they say, every rose has its thorns, and our songbird friend here comes with its own bittersweet symphony. For all their musical prowess, mule birds are the tragic heroes of the bird world. Despite their captivating chorus, they've been dealt a cruel hand by nature, or should we say, by us. They're sterile, forever singing solos without the chance to create a choir of their own. And this is where we, the audience, have to take a bow. We bred these birds for our amusement, crafting a creature that could never craft a lineage of its own. A poignant reminder of the Pandora's box that is crossbreeding, where human curiosity can sometimes strike a discordant note. In our number 5 spot today, we have the lepon, lepon, whatever you prefer. It's a magnificent creature that'll leave you both fascinated and slightly disconcerted. A head like a regal lion, complete with a majestic mane paired with a sleek and agile leopard body. It's a blend of two of nature's most iconic feline species, resulting in a mesmerizing and puzzling spectacle. The lepon's rarity is truly a sight to behold. You won't find these hybrids roaming the wild. They are a product of human intervention, born in captivity, where biology took a turn down a very peculiar path. It's a reminder of the lengths we humans sometimes go to bend nature to our will. Apparently we couldn't resist the temptation to create such a majestic mashup, but let's not forget the questions this creature raises. Does the lepon represent a triumph in human ingenuity or a meddling with Mother Nature's design? Should we be playing Dr. Frankenstein with the building blocks of life? These are philosophical ponderings that tickle the brain as we admire these hybrids. In our number 4 spot today, we have the narluga, mostly on this list just because I wanted to say the word narluga. Prepare to have your senses confounded as we delve into the depths of this peculiar crossbreed, born from the unlikely fusion of a narwhal and a beluga whale. Through the marvels of scientific scrutiny, DNA analysis of these very peculiar looking whale skulls has confirmed the existence of the narluga. But let me tell you, this hybrid is not your ordinary seaside mashup. It's a creature that walks the line between awe and unease. Imagine a majestic narwhal, its sleek body elegantly adorned with a spiraling tusk, entwined with the playful charm of a beluga whale. It's a fantastical creation that seems to defy nature's conventional boundaries, leaving us both mesmerized and slightly unnerved. As we gaze upon this remarkable example of crossbreeding in wild cetaceans, we can't help but wonder, what other surprises does nature hold? Are there more uncanny blends lurking beneath the surface? In our number 3 spot today, we have a growler bear. This enigmatic creature, born from the extraordinary union of polar bears and grizzly bears, is a captivating blend of nature's mightiest beasts. As climate change wreaks havoc on our planet, the boundaries of bear territories are being reshaped. Polar bears, driven by warming temperatures, venture further south, while grizzlies, seeking cooler climates, migrate north. And lo and behold, in the midst of this changing landscape, the territories of these noble creatures begin to overlap, leading to the emergence of rare hybrids, the growler bears. With their unique combination of traits, the growler bears possess the adaptability of both the open tundra and the dense forests. They're like nature's bold experiment in climate change adaptation, straddling the line between two contrasting habitats. It's a very fascinating glimpse into the way that these magnificent creatures navigate the shifting world that they inhabit, but let's not forget the disconcerting undertone. The very existence of the growler bear highlights the plight of these majestic species, forced to intermingle due to the encroaching impacts of climate change. In our number 2 spot today, we have the cama. Through the power of artificial insemination, the cama came into existence, a blend of the camel's imposing size and strength with the llama's more manageable temperament. It's a very bizarre concoction that raises both eyebrows and curiosity. Just imagine a creature roaming the earth with the body of a camel and the endearing charm of a llama. A sight to to behold indeed, yet in the grand tapestry of hybrid creations, the Kama remains a very uncommon marvel. Only a few of these extraordinary beings grace our world, making them a very elusive sight, even among the vast array of crossbreeds. Their rarity adds an air of mystique to their existence, leaving us with a sense of wonder and yet a hint of unease. While the intention behind the Kama's creation was to combine desirable traits, we can't help but question the boundaries we push in the name of scientific exploration. What does it mean to meddle with nature's design, reshaping creatures for our own purposes? The Kama serves as a reminder that with great power comes great responsibility. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Jag Lion, a magnificent blend of a male jaguar and a female lion, boasting a combination of very powerful physical traits and stunning markings. But as we marvel at this majestic creature, let us not forget the deeper ethical complexities that lurk beneath its mesmerizing surface. The Jag Lion is a rare gem, a product of human intervention in the delicate world of crossbreeding large cat species. Its existence serves as a stark reminder of the ethical quandaries that arise when we meddle with the natural order of things. While the Jag Lion captivates us with its undeniable beauty, it also forces us to question the impact of our actions on the creatures that roam this earth. Sure, the Jag Lion is truly a sight to behold, with its fierce jaguar traits melded seamlessly with the regal presence of the lion, but we must pause and reflect upon the intricate web of consequences that follow such hybrid creations. Is it right for us to manipulate nature's course, blurring the lines between species and tampering with the delicate balance of ecosystems?
And we're starting things off with ocean acidification. So imagine the ocean as a giant sponge that's been soaking up a lot of the extra carbon dioxide we've been pumping into the air. As the ocean takes in more carbon dioxide, it undergoes a chemical change. That extra CO2 combines with water to create something called carbonic acid, basically a more acidic ocean. It's like turning the ocean into a slightly sour lemonade. So imagine trying to build a house with bricks that dissolve in acid. Well, that's the struggle for creatures like oysters and clams and some tiny sea creatures. The more acidic water makes it tough for them to grow their protective shells or skeletons. Coral reefs are like the bustling cities of the ocean, home to a gazillion marine species. But with ocean acidification, corals have trouble building their intricate skeletons, which is a big deal. We're talking real trouble for little fishies who call coral reefs home. Fish are pretty sensitive to changes in their homes. When the acidity goes up, it messes with their sense of smell, navigation, and even how they grow. And on an even smaller scale, if the little guys at the bottom, like the plankton, are struggling, it can cause a ripple effect, impacting everything up the food chain from fish to us humans. And at number 9, we have the year without summer, which was 1816, a real crummy year. That year, something bizarre happened around the world. It was dubbed the year without summer. What happened was a massive volcanic eruption that occurred a year earlier in Indonesia. This eruption was so colossal that it shot a huge amount of volcanic ash and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. Now, when this volcanic debris spread globally, it created a sort of atmospheric shield reflecting sunlight away from Earth. The consequence was a significant drop in temperatures across the northern hemisphere during the summer of 1816. People experienced cold temperatures, unexpected frosts, and in some places even snowfall during these summer months. I feel depressed just having said that out loud. Just think of the impact it would have had on agriculture. Crops failed miserably, farmers watched as their corn and grains withered away in the fields, livestock faced hunger, and people who relied on farming struggled to put food on the table. But there was one awesome thing that came out of that magical summer of 16. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, which is not surprising in the slightest. And at number 8, we have wildfires. So been far more of these things raging in recent years, often sparked by lightning or human activities like campfires or discarded cigarettes. But when conditions are particularly dry, lots of dead plants and trees around, it can quickly grow into a monstrous blaze. Nature can be a bit of a pyromaniac sometimes. Lightning strikes and bam, you've got a huge fire. But humans can play a big part too, whether it's a careless camper or someone not thinking twice before tossing a cigarette. But wildfires scorch everything in their path. Trees, plants, animals, you name it. The heat is so intense that it can turn towering trees into crispy matchsticks. Animals lose their homes, their hiding spots, and sometimes, sadly, their lives. But these extreme fires don't always just stay in the forest. As we know, smoke billows in the air, carrying particles that can mess with our lungs and turn the sky into a hazy, apocalyptic scene. When wildfires get too close to homes, people have to pack up and leave, not knowing when or if they'll have a home to come back to. And after the smoke clears, there's the aftermath: erosion, loss of biodiversity, and an increased risk of flash floods because there's no vegetation to absorb the rainwater and reduce runoff anymore.
At number 7, a prank gone wrong. Halloween is a time when the line between playful and the pearliest blurs, which showcases an unsettling reality beyond mere ghost stories and spooky costumes. In a chilling incident back in '98, the Bronx became a stage for a horrifying event. Picture this: a man simply waiting in his car to pick up his girlfriend's son from a joyous Halloween gathering, but out of the night, a group of rowdy teens appeared, bombarding the vehicle with eggs and sparking a tense altercation. Now, seemingly pacified, the man returned to his car, only for the situation to take a dark turn. In a sudden tragic twist, one of the teenagers drew a weapon and fatally shot the man in the noggin. At number 6 is a plea for help. This dude from Oregon was unboxing Halloween decorations only to stumble upon a plea for help, a chilling letter seemingly penned by a Chinese labor camp inmate. It detailed the harsh conditions of their imprisonment, sparking international concern. This wasn't your typical Halloween scare, it was a real-life horror story. The investigation into this revelation highlights the dark side of production processes, drawing attention to the forced labor allegations. You see, China's labor camps, where individuals are detained without trial for minor infractions, are under the spotlight. And this isn't an isolated incident either. Reports of labor conditions at Chinese factories have triggered global scrutiny. Instances like the Foxconn strikes and the previous worker unalivings have led to reevaluations of the workplace regulations. Halloween might seem spooky, but real-life horrors like these paint a much scarier picture. At number 5 is the Indiana ice skating explosion. On Halloween night in 1963, an eerily unexpected and catastrophic event transpired at the Indiana State Fairground Coliseum during the Holiday on Ice showcase in Indianapolis. See, what was meant to be an evening of festive entertainment quickly turned into a horrifying nightmare. You see, as the clock ticked past 11 p.m., the bustling atmosphere shifted drastically. Leaking propane gas, unbeknownst to the attendees and performers, erupted into a devastating explosion. The force of the blast shattered the tranquility, causing the floor to cave in, leaving behind a haunting, immense crater. The calamity claimed the lives of 74 individuals, inflicted injuries upon roughly 400 others. Eyewitness accounts painted a haunting scene, likening it to a ghastly wartime experience. One reporter vividly described the aftermath as a surreal and distressing sight akin to something witnessed on the battlefield. At number 4 is The War of the Worlds. Orson Welles is a visionary actor, writer, and director who orchestrated a radio drama titled The War of the Worlds, which cunningly simulated a Martian invasion through radio announcements. The show was designed to mimic actual breaking news, immersing listeners in a vivid narrative that blurred the line between fiction and reality. The outcome was pandemonium. A large proportion of the audience, unaware of the broadcast's theatrical nature, fell victim to panic, convinced that aliens were actually wreaking havoc in New Jersey. The broadcast's realism was so persuasive that it captured the attention of approximately 12 million listeners, and shockingly, around 1 million of those believed the otherworldly invasion was authentic, and the result was utter chaos. At number 3 is Houdini. So picture this: it's 1926 Halloween night, and Houdini just wrapped up one of his most astounding performances, but it wasn't all smoke and mirrors. See, Houdini was showing some students in Montreal a few tricks of the trade when he dropped a rather bold claim, bragging about how his abs were so rock solid that they could take any punch. Well, the student, likely thinking challenge accepted, sucker punched him right in the gut not once, but twice. Houdini initially brushed it off, but soon he was clutching his stomach in agony. Turns out those punches had ruptured his appendix, leading to a fatal poisoning. But here's where it gets spooky. You see, rumors suggest that it might not have been an accident. Some believe that Houdini was silenced by spiritualists, a group he had been exposing as frauds in his quest to debunk the supernatural. A Halloween trick that went too far, or something more sinister? I'll let you guys be the judge down in the comments. At number 2 That's not a decoration. In 2014, Halloween took a chilling turn when a scene straight out of a horror movie unfolded on a New York street. A man dragging what appeared to be a headless body out of his apartment, kicking the head across the street. People, thinking it was just a macabre yet convincing Halloween setup, chuckled nervously, but as the night wore on, the truth emerged, shattering the assumption that it was all just a spooky spectacle. The decoration turned out to be Patricia Ward, a real person, decapitated by her own son, who struggled with mental health issues. After leaving his mother's body in the street, the night took an even darker turn as he tragically chose to end his life by stepping in front of an oncoming train. At number 1, poisoned candy. Halloween is a night eagerly awaited by kids for the thrill of dressing up and the promise of a bag full of sugary treats, but in 1974, it took a terrifying turn, leaving a lasting mark on the holiday. The culprit was none other than Ronald Clark O'Brien, a figure not from a scary movie, but a real-life horror. Disguised as a caring father out trick-or-treating with the neighborhood kids, O'Brien did the unthinkable. He distributed pixie sticks filled with cyanide to unsuspecting trick-or-treaters, including his own, all while pretending to revel in the Halloween spirit. His motivation was a horrific and twisted plan to claim his son's life insurance money. That's not just a family tragedy, it's a sinister attempt to make an urban legend a reality. This night of innocent fun turned into a night of unimaginable horror, a stark reminder that even in the midst of joy and harmless festivities, there can be genuine. At number 10, the son of Sam predicts an unaliving. Back in 1981, Halloween brought more than just spooky costumes and candy. It bore witness to a chilling event that still sends shivers down our spines. Imagine this, a prediction of an unaliving made by none other than David Berkowitz, famously known as the son of Sam, while he was serving time at the high-security Attica Correctional Facility. Berkowitz foretold a haunting narrative of a cult-driven unaliving, a tale that was initially dismissed as fiction until it materialized into a real horror story. During the eerie early hours of that Halloween morning, within a Manhattan home, the lives of Ronald Sisman, 39, and Elizabeth Platzman, 20, met a tragic and violent end. They were savagely beaten, fatally shot, mirroring Berkowitz's detailed description of the apartment layout and the involvement of a cult. The bone-chilling aspect is that the unaliving eagerly aligned with Berkowitz's narrative, which remains an unsolved mystery. Whether it was an uncanny coincidence or a bone-chilling premonition remains a haunting question that still sends shivers down our collective spines. Number 9 is the trick-or-treat unaliver. Ever thought Halloween was just about harmless scares and fun costumes? Well, let me tell you about a bone-chilling event from 1957. Picture this, it's a quiet Halloween night, shattered by an unaliving that unfolded like a scene from a thriller. You see, Peter Fabiano, a seemingly regular guy in California, was shot with a pew-pew at point blank in a horrifying trick-or-treat unaliving. The plot thickens with a tangled web of relationships. You see, the prime suspect, Joanne Rebel, was entangled in a love triangle involving Fabiano's wife, Betty. The motive was jealousy. See, Rebel felt scorned and hatched a plan to eliminate Fabiano. The story takes a sinister turn as Rebel manipulated Goldine Prizer into executing the fatal shot. Dressed in a disguise, Pizer pulled the trigger, believing she was under Rabel's control due to a supposed spell. Yeah, I'm not sure how that's gonna hold up in court. Their crime was discovered when an anonymous tip led police to a hidden pew-pew. The ladies were caught, confessed, and ended up serving time for their chilling act. At number 8 is the Cradle Snatcher. On an eerie Halloween night in 1997, something terrifying unfolded. Nima Louise Carter inexplicably vanished from her locked room, her empty cradle a haunting mystery. A month passed before the grim discovery shook her town. Her body was discovered in a long-abandoned house's refrigerator. But the horror didn't begin and end there. You see, a year earlier, 2 twins fell victim to a similar chilling abduction, lured out of their home and trapped in a refrigerator, identifying their babysitter as the malevolent force behind the ordeal. And shockingly, the very same babysitter later emerged in connection to Nima's case, yet never faced conviction. The babysitter was eventually charged for the twins' unaliving, serving a life sentence, but maintained an eerie silence about Nima's tragic fate.
Number 7, the disappeared. I can honestly say that I never knew about this, and I think the US involvement may be why no one wants you to know. Also, forewarning, I'm sorry if I mispronounce anything here, feel free to correct me down below, and that goes for all the points. So, in September 1973, Chile's president Salvador Allende was overthrown in a coup that was assisted by the US government. General Augusto Pinochet then took over, and he was not good. Augusto was a very ruthless leader and did not let up on anyone who spoke out against him. Journalists, politicians, celebrities, pretty much anyone who spoke out seemed to suddenly disappear. Some were later found in alleyways or ditches all over Santiago, while others were never found at all. This American-backed leader essentially used the National Stadium as a secret terror base where he rounded up those who opposed him and did some pretty unspeakable things. During the 17 years that he ruled, around 40,000 people were subjected to horrible treatment, while at least 3,200 of them passed away or just straight up disappeared. Number 6. Atom bomb, baby. J. Robert Oppenheimer first witnessed the devastation caused by the device that he created on July 16, 1945. He was not wrong to be afraid of it. Ever since the obliteration of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, taking the lives of between 129,000 and 226,000 people, the entire world knows the absolute world-ending potential nuclear war could unleash. Oppenheimer was the leader of the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos, New Mexico, beginning in 1942, which was basically meant to figure out how to use atomic energy for the military. They were successful enough that it directly led to Oppenheimer wanting to completely stop development, and then, when they wouldn't, he straight up resigned. Instead, he became chairman of the General Advisory Committee of the Atomic Energy Commission, and in October 1949, he opposed the development of the devices that he helped create. This simple opposition led to him being labeled a communist supporter, suspended from secret nuclear research, and stripped of his security clearance by the Atomic Energy Commission. As soon as these devices were created and we saw their full unbridled power, not to mention the fallout that takes place afterwards, I think we can all say we would like to forget that this level of destruction is even real in the first place. Number 5. Saved. We may want to forget the destructive power of those nuclear devices, but we should acknowledge 2 times that we were saved from all-out nuclear war. The first incident was in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Soviet Vice Admiral Vasily Arkhipov, which I think I pronounced right, was on board a nuclear sub near Cuba. Unfortunately, the submarine was unable to pick up any incoming radio signals, which freaked everyone out on board, and they were unsure whether war had actually started or not. There was a vote among 3 officers on whether or not to launch a nuke. We need to thank all our lucky stars that Vasily, being the lone no vote, saved us all on that day. But there was another time. In 1983, during the Cold War, sunlight reflecting off of high altitude clouds confused the Soviet missile detection system, causing it to indicate that there were 5 incoming missiles assumed to be American. A lone Soviet lieutenant colonel, Stanislav Petrov, reasoned that if the US was initiating nuclear war, it would likely be an all-out attack and not just 5 missiles. He was right, and against military orders, Petrov determined it to be a false alarm and avoided a retaliatory launch by the USSR. Arkhipov and Petrov avoided all-out nuclear war. Never forget these guys. Number 4. Chinatown, LA. I bet you won't find this one in your history books, kids, but you should. In 1871, specifically on October 24th, 1871, a large mob of about 500 white men raided Chinatown in Los Angeles. This resulted in the brutal passing of at least 20 Chinese Americans, but on top of that, the mob also stole an estimated $1.5 million worth of property. Even though there is absolutely no justification for this level of animosity, the mob formed in response to a shootout that had taken place that same day that ended up taking the life of police officer Robert Thompson. That itself caused a commotion, and people began shouting the absolutely horrible statement that the Chinese were trying to take the lives of white people. You add some fear together with some ignorance and a large heaping spoonful of racism, and boom, a mob emerged. It was the very start of a decade of similar occurrences against Asian American communities in the US, which even led to the passing of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which prohibited all immigration of Chinese laborers. It's horrible, but that's America's history, ain't it? Number 3. The Salem Witch Trials. Speaking of American history and irrational fear, ever heard of the Salem witch trials? You probably have. Between June and September of the year 1692, around 19 men and women were found guilty of witchcraft and burned at the stake in the small, seemingly super religious community of Salem, Massachusetts. The obvious idiocracy and horror of this event shocked the world, and in an almost sick twist of things, the trials have spawned hundreds of films, books, scholarly articles, and plays. The men and women that lost their lives that day were convicted of their witchcraft crime based on the evidence of a group of young village girls who claimed to have been, quote, bewitched. The fear of this was compounded by family feuds and Native American attacks, and it developed into complete madness and hysteria that quickly spread throughout colonial Massachusetts. After that initial burning, another 150 men and women were accused in the spring of 1692 and were only allowed to survive if they confessed to the crime of witchcraft. Number 2. Chernobyl. Chernobyl is the site of the Soviet nuclear power plant that in April of 1986 had a serious accident due to flawed reactor design and staff that didn't really get the best training. The cause of the accident itself was explained really well in the HBO miniseries and at the trial that took place in real life, and I'm much too silly to explain how it happened here, but it resulted in a steam explosion and fires that released 5% of the radioactive core into the environment. Just 5%. The explosion itself ended 2 workers' lives with acute radiation poisoning affecting a confirmed 123 people and ending 28 of those people's lives. Around 5,000 cases of thyroid cancer with 15 fatal incidents were probably caused by the radioactive iodine fallout. Look, it was not good, it was scary, and what was potentially even scarier was the way people tried to cover it up. So maybe it's best that we don't forget about this one. And finally, in at number 1, it's Armenia. Now I didn't know about this one either, so it looks like we're both learning today, huh? Armenia became part of the Ottoman Empire all the way back in the 15th century and was for the most part a Christian country. The Ottoman leaders were not very happy about this. In fact, they were furious. Mistreatment of Christian Armenians became pretty regular, and they were usually taxed more heavily and were given even fewer rights. Naturally, as you may expect, Armenians began to protest, but that wasn't going to be allowed to happen for long. Turkish military officials began slaying hundreds of thousands of Armenian people beginning in 1896. In 1914, after the Turks entered World War I on the side of the Germans, that's when the real death toll began to rise. Military leaders somehow determined that the Armenians were traitors, and so on April 24th, 1915, they took the lives of hundreds of Armenian leaders, which only led to more attacks against the Armenian people, and that all continued until 1922. The numbers don't really seem real, but more than 1 million Armenians lost their lives between 1915 and 1922. Look, I'm glad we are all now pretty aware of the horror that humans are capable of.
And we're kicking off the list with human-monkey hybrids. Spanish biochemist and developmental biologist Juan Carlos Ispidas Belmonte has been working with scientists in China to develop a new type of monkey, one whose organs are made entirely of human cells. Now, they aren't just doing this for the hell of it. The purpose is to create chimeras that can be used for organ transplants. The process involves injecting monkey embryos with human embryonic stem cells in the hopes that they'll grow together. Then you'll have these monkey creatures with human livers or kidneys, and if someone happens to need one, we can grab it from a creepy hybrid monkey. There are ethical questions involved with this though. Is it wrong to create life that's only being used to harvest organs, or is the unethical side of monkey farming outweighed by the help that it can provide? If you are liking this channel so far and you haven't subscribed yet, why not hit that subscribe button? Lots of cool videos coming your way, so don't miss out. And as always, let me know your thoughts in those comments below. At number 9, we have what I'm just gonna call mice humans, because that sounds very intriguing. What is a mouse human, you're probably asking? Well, back in 2014, scientists at the University of Rochester Medical Center pulled off something pretty wild. They managed to stick a bunch of human brain cells into lab mice. This experiment didn't just teach us more about how our brains work, it also stirred up some serious moral questions about how far we should push the boundaries of science, especially when it comes to animals. They injected these mice with human glial cells, and over time these human cells meshed with the mouse's brain, basically taking over from the mouse's original cells, and this actually resulted in the mice having an increased memory capacity. They tested tested this by playing a sound and then zapping the mice lightly. And the next time they played the sound, they noticed that the mice were on high alert, just remembering that shock 4 times better than their regular non-human brain mouse pals. But of course, nothing's ever simple, right? Alongside this pretty incredible discovery came some heavy ethical questions. Is it cool to tinker with animals' brains like this and, you know, electrocute them? Next up, we have two-headed dogs. Now, this isn't quite a crossbreeding case per se, but it is a super messed up scientific experiment that actually did happen. So alright, let's get into two-headed dog transplants, courtesy of Vladimir Demikov, a Soviet scientist who rocked the world of surgery back in the 50s. Demikov was the mastermind behind some truly bizarre experiments where he surgically attached the head of one dog onto another, a two-headed dog. Now, the idea behind these experiments was to explore the possibilities of organ transplantation and study the body's responses to these procedures. Demikov's work was groundbreaking in the world of surgery, really pushing the boundaries of what was medically possible at the time. But as you can imagine, this stirred up a massive ethical storm. The morality of creating these Frankenstein-like creatures just for scientific curiosity, it's just inherently cruel playing around with life in such a drastic manner. The dogs would not live long after these experiments. It's also just weird and creepy. I don't like the idea of a two-headed mangled dog thingy. I don't know. At least make it 3, then you'd have like an actual mythical creature on your hands, straight out of ancient Greek mythology. Number 7, the Kalavrita massacre. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Most of you have probably heard of the massacre in Oradour-sur-Glane, France, by SS soldiers. Well, stuff just like that was happening all the time in World War II, and this incident was very similar but much less known, at least outside of Greece. This massacre occurred during World War II in December of 1943. It was a brutal event carried out by German forces in retaliation for the Greek resistance activities against the Axis occupation in Greece. During the German occupation of Greece, the Greek resistance movement actively fought against these German forces. In response to the resistance activities, the SS targeted civilians, especially in small towns and villages, as a means of punishment, and they just wanted to send out a message. On December 13th, 1943, German troops, part of the 117th Jaeger Division, surrounded the town of Kalivirta in the Peloponnese region of Greece. The soldiers systematically destroyed the town and its surrounding villages. Men, women, and children were gathered in the town square. The Germans separated the men from the women. The men were while the women and young ones were locked inside a school building, which was then set on fire. Those who attempted to escape the burning building were by the German forces. Some women and children managed to escape though. One German soldier couldn't stand it anymore and opened a door, allowing some prisoners to flee. The soldier was later punished by death. After the war, some of the responsible German officers were tried for war crimes, but most of them escaped justice, and some were never even identified. Next on the list, we have the Vipeholm experiments. These unethical experiments were conducted on mentally disabled patients in Sweden between 1945 and 1955. The experiments aimed to study the effects of sugar on dental health. This was initiated by the Swedish National Board of Health and Welfare to investigate sugar consumption and its effects on teeth. The study took place at Vipeholm Mental Institution in Lund, Sweden, and test subjects were the institutionalized residents of Vipeholm, many of whom had mental disabilities. They were vulnerable, they couldn't provide informed consent. The subjects would be divided into 2 groups, with one group being given unrestricted access to sugary foods and candies, while the other were given controlled amounts. The aim was to observe the progression of dental cavities in these groups. Excessive amounts of sugary foods were given to some of the patients, far beyond what would be considered normal or healthy. Surprisingly, this led to severe dental problems. The researchers were deliberately inflicting harm on vulnerable people, and what makes this whole thing even sadder is that the results of the experiment weren't even released until years later because of how bad it looked on the confectionery industry, who were actually helping financing this. So this led to some to believe that the researchers were bought off just to keep quiet. It wasn't until the 90s where the cruel nature of these experiments finally came to light, being condemned by the public. Number 5. Attack of the Dead Men. The Attack of the Dead Men refers to a military engagement that occurred during World War I on August 6, 1915. There was a Russian stronghold located near the town of Oswiec in the Eastern Front. It was a key defensive position for the Russians against German advances. The German army, as part of the wider Central Powers offensive on the Eastern Front, attacked the fortress, aiming to break through the Russian defenses. During the battle, the Germans employed chlorine gas, a chemical weapon to weaken the Russian defenses. The gas was intended to incapacitate or unalive the soldiers defending the fortress. Now, despite being affected by this gas, some Russian soldiers, driven by pure desperation and with cloths or handkerchiefs soaked in water covering their faces, counterattacked the advancing German forces. The gas masks available at the time were not effective against chlorine gas, and the sight of Russian soldiers appearing with their faces covered in white cloths and just blood-stained from the effects of the gas, it gave rise to this legend of the dead men. They basically looked like zombies rising up and moving towards the enemy. And the fierceness of the counterattack, combined with the horrifying appearance of these Russian soldiers, caused complete terror among the German troops. They fled, and they're still being attacked from behind. Many of them died, getting trapped in their own traps and stuff. Germans believed they were facing the spirits of the dead, panicked and abandoned their on the fortress. Really cool story. Number 4, an often overlooked dark historical event is the forced sterilization programs that took place in the United States. Hard to believe this actually took place, but it did, beginning in the early 1900s up until the 70s, if you can believe that. Several states implemented eugenics programs aiming to control the population and improve the genetic quality of society. One of the methods used was forced sterilization, targeting individuals considered unfit for reproduction. The victims of these programs were often people deemed socially undesirable, people with mental illnesses, disabilities, and individuals from marginalized communities, African and Native Americans primarily. It's estimated that tens of thousands of people were forcibly sterilized under these state-sanctioned programs. The exact number difficult to determine because of poor record keeping and the fact that these procedures were kinda swept under the rug. Number 3, the Great Molasses Flood. On January 15th, 1919, a massive storage tank containing 2.3 million gallons of molasses collapsed in the North End neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. The Great Molasses Flood, also known as the Boston Molasses Disaster, resulted in widespread destruction and loss of life. The tank had been poorly constructed with weak rivets and insufficient safety measures. At around 12:30 p.m., the tank suddenly burst, releasing a wave of molasses, estimated to be about 25 feet high, moving at a speed of 35 miles per hour. The molasses wave engulfed the neighborhood, causing significant damage to buildings and streets and the Boston Elevated Railway. The disaster resulted in 21 people losing their lives and around 150 others being injured. The tank had been filled to capacity just 2 days before, and the increased pressure probably contributed to this collapse. The disappearance of the USS Cyclops. So the USS Cyclops was a United States Navy cargo ship that mysteriously disappeared during World War I. The ship was used primarily for transporting coal and was one of the Navy's largest fuel ships at the time. In March of 1918, during World War I, the USS Cyclops departed from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and made stops in Barbados and the Virgin Islands. Its final destination was Baltimore. The ship never reached its destination, though. It vanished without a trace along its route, disappearing in the infamous Bermuda Triangle. No wreckage or survivors were ever found. Various theories have been proposed as to why the ship vanished. Could have been from a storm, structural failure, or an enemy attack, but none have been proven. The disappearance of this ship resulted in the loss of 309 crew members and passengers, making it one of the largest non-combat losses of life in U.S. naval history. And finally, we're going to finish things off with a bizarre one, with the trial of a corpse. This happened in January of 897 AD, several months after the death of Pope Formosus. After Formosus died, his body was exhumed and he was put on trial. Not before he died, after. The trial was orchestrated by Pope Stephen VI or 7th, There's some debate on that. But he really just wasn't a fan of Formosus. Stephen accused Formosus of perjury, violating church laws, and of being an illegitimate pope. During the trial, Formosus's 7-month-old rotting corpse was dressed up and placed on a throne. A deacon was appointed to act as his advocate, answering questions on behalf of the dead pope. Formosus was found guilty on all charges. His papacy was declared invalid, and his acts as pope were declared invalid. 3 fingers on his right hand, which he had used for blessings, were then severed, and his remains were thrown into a river. After Pope Stephen VI's death, Pope Theodore II annulled the whole trial and restored Formosus's honors and good name. He called the trial a travesty, declaring the verdict null and void.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the mule. The humble mule, a creature born of a union between a male donkey and a female horse, is a testament to the incredible diversity of life and the possibilities of crossbreeding. This hybrid offspring has been an invaluable asset to humanity for centuries, embodying a perfect balance of strength, speed, endurance, and sure-footedness. Mules are remarkable creatures that beautifully combine the best characteristics of their parent species. However, the mule's hybrid nature comes with a biological cost. Typically, mules are sterile, a consequence that's commonly observed in hybrid species. This sterility stems from the mismatch in the number of chromosomes of their parent species, which prevents successful reproduction. Despite this genetic setback, mules have carved a very unique niche in human societies. Their remarkable abilities have made them indispensable in various sectors, including agriculture, transportation, and even warfare. The humble mule's contribution to human civilization is a testament to its resilience and adaptability, qualities that make this hybrid creature a fascinating subject of study. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Iron Age pig. Now, brace yourself for an animal so wild, it might as well have time traveled straight from the Iron Age to your screen. We're talking about the Iron Age pig, a real porky paradox born from a cross between your friendly neighborhood domestic pig and the not so friendly wild boar. You'd think, being half domestic, these little critters would be up for a snuggle, right? Well, wrong. Despite packing some serious resilience in their porcine bodies, these hogs are about as sociable as a grizzly with a toothache. Their aggression levels are dialed up to 11, making them about as farm-friendly as a pack of velociraptors. So, what's the moral of this little piggy tale? Well, it turns out playing Mother Nature isn't as easy as it sounds. The Iron Age pig experiment ended up being less eureka and more uh-oh. A big snorting reminder that when it comes to tampering with the blueprints of life, maybe we should leave it to the pros. In short, these bristly hybrids stand as living, grunting proof that not every trip down memory lane is a stroll in the park. In our number 8 spot today, we have the hinny. Picture this: the sprinting stamina of a racehorse and the stubborn grit of a donkey, all rolled into one. Welcome to the fascinating, if a bit troublesome, life of a hinny. This peculiar beast is what you get when you mix a male horse's speed and a female donkey's tenacity. Despite the fact that they could probably outlast a marathon runner and have lifespans that would make a tortoise nod in approval, hinnies don't exactly have it easy. For starters, they usually can't have little hinnies of their own. Yeah, nature hit them with a sterile tag just like the mules. And then there's the elephant in the room. Or should we say the horse and donkey in the room. They've got a mum who's petite and a dad who's, well, horsier. The mismatch is like trying to blend a sports car with a minivan. The result is awkward. In the end, the life of a hinny is a cautionary tale straight from nature's own genetic soap opera. A clear memo that when it comes to stirring up the gene pool, sometimes you might end up with a cocktail that's a little bit more bitter than sweet.
And at number 7, we have the Zonky, Zorse, Zedonk. They all sound like something out of Dr. Seuss, but they're a very real thing. They're a female or male zebra mixed with either a female or male horse or a female or male donkey. Whatever the variation though, it's highly unethical. Breeding these things might seem kind of intriguing, but it raises ethical red flags. Just like any animal hybrid, the big issue here is that these hybrids are usually sterile, rendering them unable to reproduce naturally, which raises concerns about about their overall well-being. Breeding animals for novelty or profit, knowing they can't lead to substantial populations, seems a little ethically rocky. Plus, they often have health issues related to their mixed genetic makeup. There's just no purpose in breeding these animals other than the spectacle of it. Next up, we have whalefinns. Made a false killer whale, which is a more aggressive species of dolphin, with a common bottlenose dolphin, and you get a whalefin. These hybrids have been known to occur in captivity in marine parks or aquariums, and that's a big part of the bad ethics behind this one. Marine parks are notoriously crappy to animals, but aside from how these animals are often treated in these places, whalefinns, like many hybrid animals, often face health issues and higher mortality rate compared to their parent species. The mixing of genetic material from different species can lead to various psychological and behavioral problems, causing suffering and reducing their overall quality of life. Whalefinns can't occur naturally in the wild because of the geographical and just behavioral differences between false killer whales and bottlenose dolphins. Breeding them in captivity is not part of the natural order. It's human tinkering. Plus, combining a highly intelligent dolphin with an apex predator dolphin, maybe not the best idea. Next on the list are monkeys infused with human brain cells. Chinese scientists have recently achieved a pretty big milestone in the realm of neurobiology, basically infusing human brain cells into monkeys, process that created chimeric embryos, organisms consisting of cells from both humans and monkeys. The objective here was to gain a better understanding of brain development and disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases. Scientists wanted to understand how human brain cells, once integrated into the monkey brains, behaved and interacted with the host environment. It's a fascinating experiment, but there are of course moral implications of blending human and animal cells and possible consequences too. I've said this before, but I just do not want a Planet of the Apes situation. I don't want a rogue AI situation. Virtually any science fiction situation happening in real life is a no-no. Sometimes I feel like scientists just haven't watched or read any science fiction before. And at number 4, we have another real case of a successful head transplant, this one done with a monkey. So meet Dr. Robert White. Dr. Robert White, a neurosurgeon who took inspiration from Vladimir Demikov's wild experiments and decided to push the envelope even further in the 70s. Dr. White didn't stop at two-headed dogs. He aimed for something even more audacious: monkey head transplants. So Dr. White successfully transplanted the head of one monkey onto the body of another. It's giving me some real Sid from Toy Story vibes here. But to be fair, the procedure wasn't just about curiosity. It was an attempt to understand the intricacies of spinal cord fusion and nerve connections. I was trying to explore the possibility of giving paralyzed or severely disabled people a new lease on life. But, at the same time, a monkey's head being placed onto the body of another one is just, people get a little creeped out by that. The idea of swapping heads between animals, just kind of gross. Once again, the monkeys also did not live long after the procedures. Next up, we have Sam Harris, aka the Pigman of Northfield. This is definitely the most believable of all the things on this list. The story goes that a 17-year-old boy, Sam Harris, went missing on October 30th in the hills of Northfield, Vermont in 1951. Harris had gone out to egg some houses that night, but never returned home. A search was launched, but he never turned up. But in the months that followed, sightings of Sam began being reported, only he looked different. He wore the face of a pig and would terrorize the New England locals. Farmers began finding their pigs slaughtered and horrendously maimed. Rumors began to spread about him having become this half-man, half-pig abomination, and even laying with pigs, creating an entire breed of pigmen offspring. So yeah, why wasn't this taught in school? Like, forget fractions, I want pigman, pigman, pigman. Alright, second place, humanzees. The concept of a chimpanzee-human hybrid has been around for years. Although there aren't any definitive documented cases of this ever having worked, there are real-life cases of attempts being made. First in the 1920s, a Soviet scientist with too many V's in his name, Ilya Ivanov, he attempted to create a chimp human. His attempt was pretty blunt. Put some human love juice into some female chimps. Luckily, this was done artificially. Surprise, surprise, but the chimps did not get pregnant. So the logical next step was, well, if chimps can't get pregnant, just take that and reverse it. Take some ape goo and try to get some human volunteers pregnant instead. And there were volunteers, surprisingly, but the experiment never actually took place, thank God. His orangutan died, and then the government exiled him. Anyway, cut to 1981, and a Chinese scientist named Ji Yongzhang claimed to have worked on a human-chimp hybrid experiment in 1967, in which a female chimp was impregnated with human you-know-what, but apparently the chimp died before actually giving birth. Finally, though, we have ligers. Ligers are not a thing from Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, they are, but they do actually exist in real life too. The hybrid offspring of a male lion and a female tiger are indeed real, but they're also met with a lot of health issues, mostly related to their size. Ligers grow much larger than their parent species, sometimes reaching lengths of 10 to 12 feet and weighing up to 900 pounds or more. Their immense size puts a lot of pressure on their bodies, including their organs and skeletal structure, but especially their hearts. Ligers often suffer from heart conditions, mainly due to their hearts struggling to support their massive bodies. And this disproportionate growth can also lead to other health issues, difficulty in breathing, arthritis, and just a shortened lifespan compared to their lion and tiger counterparts. Now, when it comes to the moral implications of creating ligers, primary concern revolves around the ethics of hybridization in captivity. Ligers don't occur naturally in the wild, and their creation is solely a result of human intervention, typically in like captive breeding facilities. Like think, what was that show? The Tiger Guy? All those kinds of places. People who collect exotic animals. Breeding ligers and other hybrids like tigans, which are the offspring of a male tiger and a female lion, it's just prioritizing human curiosity and profit over the actual welfare of the animals. It's highly exploitive, mainly done as this novel thing for entertainment purposes. And we're starting off the list with Unit 731 and its human experimentation. Unit 731 was a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. Operating in Japanese-occupied China, particularly in the Pingfang district of Harbin, Unit 731 conducted inhumane experiments on thousands of Chinese, Korean, and other prisoners of war, as well as civilians, including women and young ones. The unit was responsible for numerous atrocities. They conducted experiments to study the effects of biological weapons such as anthrax, plague, and cholera on human subjects. Prisoners were infected with these deadly diseases to observe their progression and develop methods of contagion. Often subjected to dissection without anesthesia, they were also exposed to freezing temperatures to observe the effects of frostbite. Some experiments involved forcing victims to stand barefoot in the snow until their limbs froze, allowing researchers to study the gangrene that followed. Researchers also tested various weapons like bombs and flamethrowers on live human subjects to observe their effectiveness and impact on the human body. Some prisoners were tied to stakes and used as targets for grenades and other explosives to study the effects of shrapnel wounds. This is just the tip of the iceberg too. The things carried out here were absolutely nightmarish. And at number 9, we have human zoos. These were actually just what they sound like. You'd think human zoos are something out of like a science fiction movie or something, humans being held in captivity and observed in their quote-unquote natural habitat by aliens, but this really was a thing right here on Earth. There was a human zoo right in Coney Island. Human zoos existed shockingly up until the 1930s, possibly even further than that. Really not that long ago. Human zoos were public exhibits of people, typically from non-Western cultures, displayed in a zoo-like environment during the 19th and early 20th centuries. These exhibits were part of colonial exhibitions and world's fairs in Europe and North America. These zoos were made to emphasize the belief in the cultural and racial superiority of Europeans over non-European people at the time. People from various indigenous cultures and ethnic groups, Africans, Native Americans, Asians, Pacific Islanders, they were often brought to these exhibitions. They were made to live in mock natural habitats, perform dances and ceremonies, and regular daily activities, all within the confines of a designated exhibit area. Exhibits were often accompanied by posters and pamphlets and educational displays reinforcing these very stereotypical and misconceptions about the exhibited cultures. Pretty wild stuff. Next on the list we have the radium girls. The term radium girl refers to female factory workers who were employed by the United States Radium Corporation in New Jersey and the Radium Dial Company in Illinois in 1917 to about 1926. These workers were responsible for painting watch dials with a luminous paint containing radium. What they weren't told at the time is that radium is incredibly toxic. These workers were tasked with using small brushes to paint radium-based paint onto watch and clock dials to create precise markings. They were often told to shape the brush using their lips and tongues so that they'd have a more kind of sharp tip. So they were just ingesting radium on a regular basis. Over time, many of the radium girls began to experience some serious health problems: anemia, bone fractures, necrosis of the jaw. They also developed various cancers. As these health issues started coming to light, some of the women sought legal action against the companies. In the 1920s, several workers filed lawsuits against the USRC and Radium Dial Company for negligence and demanding compensation for their suffering. In the end, this case played a big role in the types of safety standards we have in workplaces today. Next on the list we have flash floods. The rain hits hard and fast, and before you know it, the streets turn into rivers. So here's the lowdown. Flash floods, as you can probably imagine, happen very fast, often within 6 hours of heavy rainfall or the sudden release of water. Unlike the slow and steady types of floods, when heavy rainfall hits, especially over a short period or in areas with lots of concrete like cities with limited green spaces where the rain can't seep into the ground as easily, it races over streets, sidewalks, and drains, causing chaos. Sometimes it's not just the rain though. If a dam breaks or there's a sudden release of water upstream, rivers and streams can overflow, catching everyone downstream off guard. Flash floods can sweep through neighborhoods, submerging homes, roads, and everything in their path. The water also moves fast. That swift current is powerful enough to carry away pretty much anything in its way. In hilly or mountainous areas, flash floods can trigger landslides. The water soaks into the soil, making it heavy and unstable, causing parts of the landscape to slide down like a muddy avalanche. Number 6, droughts. These are prolonged dry spells that can turn lush landscapes into something more akin to a desert. There are a few reasons why droughts happen. Sometimes it's due to a lack of rain, but it can also be influenced by factors like higher temperatures, which lead to increased evaporation. Farmers depend on rain to grow our food, and droughts kind of make that difficult. Crops wither, fields turn into dusty landscapes. It's not just bad for farmers either. It leads to food shortages and price hikes for everybody. Droughts put a strain on water supplies, leading to restrictions, water shortages, and in extreme cases the need for drastic conservation measures. And of course, nature has its own water needs. Droughts can dry up rivers and lakes, affecting aquatic life. Forests become more susceptible to those wildfires we discussed earlier. Droughts can contribute to desertification, turning once fertile lands into like a Mad Max style type wasteland. Alright, this is a weird one. And number 5, we have red rain. Yes, this is a very real thing, although it's incredibly rare. In July of 2001, people in Kerala were going about their usual business when suddenly raindrops weren't the usual clear or slightly cloudy, but a vibrant shade of red. No warning, no heads up. Just a sudden change in the rain's hue. This was pretty horrific for everyone. Not every day that you see red rain falling from the heavens. Cue the investigation. Turns out the color wasn't due to some divine apocalyptic event, but rather microscopic spores from local algae. The culprits were identified as airborne spores from a green microalgae. These tiny green algae got swept up into the atmosphere, and when they mixed with rain clouds, the result was a crimson rain. And at number 4, we have tornadoes. I think anyone who watched The Wizard of Oz as a kid developed a bit of a fear of tornadoes. Unless you actually believed they would whisk you away into a magical fairy tale land. That would be great. You know, talking lions, scarecrows, and witches, and aggressive flying monkeys, giant angry heads. You know what? Maybe Oz freaked me out more than the threat of an actual tornado, now that I think about it. Anyway, these giant spinning columns of air air reach down from a storm cloud to touch the ground. They usually show up when warm, moist air clashes with cool, dry air. This clash sets off a spinning motion in the atmosphere. If conditions are just right, that spinning can tighten into a tornado. When a tornado touches down, it's like a colossal vacuum cleaner sweeping across the land. It can tear up everything in its path: trees, houses, even cars. The wind in a tornado is no joke. We're talking speeds that can make your average hurricane look like a gentle breeze. It's so powerful that it can lift heavy stuff into the air and toss it around like it's weightless. There's an area of the US called Tornado Alley, and includes parts of Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Kansas, South Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska, the epicenter of tornado action. Number 3, the Little Ice Age. What a cute name for something that sucks. An ice age. Not something I ever want to live to experience, no matter how little you say it is. This was a significant period of cooler temperatures that stretched from roughly the 14th to the 19th centuries. Ugh, that's a long time. It was a long stretch where winter hung around a bit too long and summer seemed a little bit shy. The Thames River in London freezing over, creating frost fairs where people would set up markets and festivities on the ice. Cooler temperatures meant that growing seasons were of course shorter, which wasn't great for agriculture. Crops struggled to ripen, leading to food shortages and sometimes even famines. Mountain glaciers expanded during this period, so if you were planning a summer vacation to the Alps back then, you might have needed warmer clothes than you'd expect today. And it wasn't always just a steady chill. It had its moments of extreme cold, and this period of cooling influenced art and literature. Paintings from the time often depict winter scenes, and there's a certain melancholic tone to some of the literature from this period. Scientists have said it was likely a combination of factors that caused this mini ice age: changes in solar activity, shifts in ocean currents, and a higher amount of volcanic eruptions spewing out sun-blocking particles into the atmosphere, like that awful summer of 1816 we discussed earlier. Next on the list is haboob. Fun word. In 2011, Phoenix, Arizona experienced a weather phenomenon that sounds kind of like a magical incantation rather than a meteorological event: the haboob. This was a massive dust storm that swept through the city. Haboobs are walls of dust towering over everything in their path, moving like a tidal wave. In July of 2011, one of these colossal dust storms rolled through Phoenix, engulfing the city in this surreal, otherworldly haze. They typically form in arid regions when powerful downdrafts form a thunderstorm, hit the ground, stirring up dust and sand. In Phoenix, the stage was set as a massive dust cloud gathered momentum in the desert. As the haboob descended upon Phoenix, it transformed the clear blue sky into a murky orange brownish abyss. Visibility plummeted and the cityscape disappeared under this thick blanket of dust. Motorists were screwed. Anyone unlucky enough to be caught outside was screwed. Photographs and videos of this storm's arrival went viral. The contrast of that city skyline disappearing into this massive wall of dust is slightly apocalyptic looking. Finally, we have another one of the oddest events in the history of modern day weather: the Australian hailstorm of 1999. So it's a hot summer day in Sydney, Australia, in April of 1999. People are going about their business, enjoying the sunshine, when suddenly dark clouds start to gather on the horizon. What started as a seemingly ordinary storm quickly escalated into a hailstorm of epic proportions. Hailstones the size of tennis balls, some even larger, began pelting down from the sky. As the massive hailstones bombarded the city, chaos ensued. Car roofs were dented, windows shattered. It was basically a frozen artillery barrage, just wreaking havoc on the unsuspecting city below. The aftermath was no less dramatic. The scale of damage prompted a surge in insurance claims, making it one of the costliest natural disasters in Australian history. But there's always a glimmer of hope to be found, even in the darkest, or in this case, strangest of times. Car repair shops were making bank, so good for them.